Hello, I'm Jane Farrell from the Florentine. This evening we're here with another instalment of our TF Together series, our regular online meetups to keep the community connected at this time. This evening we're joined by the fabulous author Kamin Mohammadi, who's going to guide us through some mindfulness techniques and give us some tips and tricks about how we can best look after our well-being. Of course, that's something essential right now when we're undeniably all experiencing some increased stress. So how can we come to a calmer place? Perhaps, Calvin, you could begin by introducing yourself and maybe a bit about your literary works as well, in case our readers aren't familiar.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Kamin Mohammadi, and I'm a writer, a journalist, broadcaster, and also the bit that I don't normally kind of talk about too much is that I've been a yoga teacher for quite a long time and practitioner of all of these methods for about half of my life. I'm 50 now, so I think I started when I was sort of 20 something, and actually I've found that in these days, you know, in our lockdown, these practices have become really essential. So they're less something that I do if I have time, or but they've become the absolute priority. And in a way, weirdly, that's kind of the gift of this time as well. Is it's making us. It certainly made me really focus on staying well, because if I don't feel okay, then I can't do everything else. So, which is right, hopefully, and engage in, all of these lovely interactions. And so I've written, my first book is The Cypress Tree, which is the writing of this brought me to Florence. And then this is the story of what happened when I came to Florence. So that's the second book. That's the American cover. But I think down here somewhere you can sort of see the English cover as well. But it's it exists in various kind of languages. And the thing with Bella Figura is obviously the first book was all about Iran, and it was a family memoir, so it traced the roots of the revolution, the modern history of Iran, but really it was also about being an immigrant, being an exile, and losing my identity, I suppose, in order to fit in and integrate as a child. And then my kind of journey back to finding and integrating, my kind of Iranianness. And funnily enough, I realized afterwards that in order to write about my exile, I had put myself back in exile. So I left the UK and sort of came to exile in Florence, but which was a wonderfully sort of nurturing place, actually, to be able to face all of the things that I had to in order to write that. And partly because of all of the wonderful things that happened to me when I was in Florence, why I decided to stay, and also what I discovered when I was in Italy, which helped me to combat some of the things that I'd been suffering from for many years, because I'd had a very highly stressful job in London, which was basically the kind of Italian lifestyle, Italian way of living and eating and being, all of that. So I wanted really to communicate that to people, and I wanted to communicate that particularly to people who don't live in Italy, don't have the option to kind of throw up their lives and move somewhere beautiful and nurturing, but also give people kind of ideas and tips for how they could bring those practices into their everyday lives, wherever they are. And so to that end, the book is divided in, each chapter is a month. We start in January, so we go all the way through the seasons. It's a year. And at the end of each chapter, I have recipes as well, really simple recipes that people can also follow. And sort of, I hope that hidden somehow within there is a whole program, really, for how people can kind of find health and happiness the Italian way. And, Jane, funnily enough, this lockdown time has really made me refocus, re-embrace, and and really re-practice all of the things that I wrote about in the book, you know, which is a kind of guide to slow living. And given that we've all been slowed down, you know, whether we want it or not, that's that I hopefully will, you know, give people some tips and ideas.
That's it. I think we've gone from a fast pace to a slow pace, which I think has been jarring.
I've lost your audio, Jane. I can't hear you.
Oh, sugar. Can you hear me? No? Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Let me see if it's my earphones.
In any case, thank you for tuning in to the TF Together session. If you have any questions for Kamin, feel free to put in the comments. Can you hear me now, Kamin? No? These are the difficulties.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Oh, you can? Oh my goodness.
I'll write for the benefit of who can hear me then, perhaps Kamin could lead us in some breathing techniques, I guess. I'll ask Kamin here in our private chat bar, and she can perhaps figure these out.
I'm really sorry, I don't know what's happened. Do you want me to reconnect? Would that help, maybe?
You can try. Yes, you can.
I'll try reconnecting. Okay. I'll be back in a moment.
No problem, no problem. Yes, internet connections, we have all learned to rely on them more than now than ever. So any difficulty of that kind can be another challenge of this whole quarantine experience. So maybe if people could write in the comments any questions they might have about how we can approach mindfulness and what they're more interested in learning about. I think breathing techniques are something that you need a bit of guidance in how best to approach. Let's see, do we have Kamin? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful. Phew. I was just referring to perhaps you could give us some guidance on breathing techniques, because we all know that slowing down your breathing can be a way to calm yourself, but how do we actually do that? Is it just a case of slowing our breathing, or what information tips you can give us on that?
It's a really good question, and actually, I think that we all right now want to increase our immunity and also find a way to stay calmer, right? Because we're having to live with this kind of unsought for uncertainty and anxiety, right? And I think a lot of the people who are on here probably are living in Italy, so they know all about how wonderful the Italian way of eating is, and how that in itself, the kind of that slightly slower way of eating, having multiple courses, and the Italian staples, such as olive oil, are really so good for us. I go on in the book about Italian superfoods, being things like, coffee, for example. Proper good coffee has more antioxidants in it than green tea, for example. Things like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't thought caffeine would be something that would nearly be a stressor. I wouldn't have seen it as in such a positive light.
Well, you know what? I mean, I think the cappuccino comes from the Capuchin monks, who used to use coffee as a kind of an aid to meditation. So I think as long as you don't overdo it, so that you kind of end up buzzing. It's like a kind, the medicine in the right dose is perfect. And things like, really what I go on in the book about is also the things that we perceive as being bad for us, like gelato. In Italy, because of the connection, especially here in Tuscany, the connection between food and the land and the seasons makes everything quite powerful, quite simple, and really very effective, and the fact that we're talking about natural food, we're not talking about things that have been adulterated and preserved, and the fact that the Italians, the Tuscans, are so passionate about their culinary traditions is really a part of that.
Yes.
So that's not breathing, but that's a place to start. And what I really wanted to say is, while we're all maybe doing our sort of taking our supplements or our turmeric supplements, or all our ginger and the things that we know will boost our immunity and lower inflammation in the body, which is again something that we really want. All of that stuff is perfect, and it's important because our minds, I think we think that this is what controls everything, right? And actually, when you really start to study, you realize it's kind of the other way around. The majority of what happens up here is triggered by messages that come up from the body.
Right.
So a really good way to deal with a mind that is kind of out of control in fear and anxiety is to go into physical practices, which is why a good and regular diet is really important. Exercise, of course, when we can get it, as we can get it. But I think people have been really innovative, haven't they? If they can't go out for their usual runs or walks or swims or whatever, people are having kind of kitchen discos and that kind of thing, which I think is really invaluable. But the fact is that all of that becomes defunct if we're practicing all of that, but we're not dealing with what the mind is doing, because actually fear and stress, anxiety, the first thing that takes down your immune system, so there's no point in a way in making a big effort with your diet and taking care of all of those things if at the same time you're not addressing what's happening to your mind and your emotions. So that word mindfulness, which is a buzzword, but it's a useful one. What does it mean in this instance? How can it help us? It's really about bringing yourself into the present. And this is, again, something that's been forced on us a little bit, because here we are in this great uncertainty. We don't really know anything. We think, hopefully, that things are going to start to change. We're going to start to go into reapertura and the second phase. But we don't have any certainty. We don't have any certainty about that. And we don't have any real certainty about actually the world that we're going to be coming out into, right, when we're allowed to leave. A lot of us are experiencing loss of income, loss of jobs. I appreciate that there's a lot of worry around that stuff, and that's a very practical worry. Now, the very first thing to say is that we're here, and we need to, in the moment, we need to really think about what can we actually control, because we can't control what's happening with the virus. We can't control the government's response. We can't really control, what's happened in the world and sort of where our next kind of paycheck is going to come from, if that's something that you've been affected by. So that's why this idea of mindfulness and this idea of living the present really comes in very strongly.
Right.
So yes, breathing techniques, because the breath it's the first thing you do in your life and the last thing that you do, and it is life. And breathing practices is something that you can do anywhere and everywhere. You don't need a fancy studio. You don't need a lovely yoga mat. You don't need equipment. You don't need trendy leggings. You can. It's just you can do this anywhere at any time. And so I think that to try and go back to the breath is a really good way to calm ourselves down, to calm down the body, which in turn calms down the mind, and to bring ourselves really into the present moment, which now more than ever is kind of where we need to live.
Yes.
So before we can start to change our minds, calm our bodies and therefore our minds, we need to be in a state of acceptance.
Okay.
Because if we're busy resisting our situation, then it's really very hard to change anything. So I would say that the first thing, and this is my first suggestion and our first sort of practical exercise that we can do together if people would like to join in, is a kind of body scan.
Okay.
So that through that scan, that kind of method of body scanning, we can begin to understand really where we're at. You know, how are we feeling in the body? You know, because every emotion has a kind of physical effect. And it can be really useful to understand that. When you feel angry, it can be really useful to breathe, do a body scan, and to feel where in your body that anger is showing up. Are you feeling tight? Are you know? And then with the breath, we can start to relax that. And that way, you know, the messages will go to the brain, and your calm and your anger hopefully will dissipate, or whatever it is. So if everybody can make sure they're sitting or lying down comfortably, because the first thing that we, yes,
I hope I'm really,
I know, we're writers, so it's really hard. So maybe that's a really good idea. Maybe let's just do some shoulder rolls first of all. What you might want to do is squeeze your shoulders right up to your ears, and then taking sort of your scapula, take them back. Think about taking the scapula. Think about making the kind of edges, the points of your shoulder blades kiss, yeah, behind you, and then pushing them down. Okay, and then releasing that and staying in that. Okay, so we want to try and keep the spine nice and straight. And if you're not comfortable with sitting, and you're not confident that your spine will stay straight as you're sitting, then please lie down, because that, you know, that's a pretty good way to get the straight spine.
Kamin, I apologize. I hate to interrupt you, especially for something that is so about being in the moment, but we're getting some messages about an echo on your side. Is there any chance it's still...
I'm hearing it as well, and I don't know what...
I'm not hearing it from my side, but clearly we've had a few comments coming in, so it must be...
I can hear it. Let me again go to my earphones and see what's going on.
Apologies, it's just, this is something that it's worth listening to in its best format, as opposed to... apologies for the echo. I suppose keeping in the calm, relaxed space Kamin was about to get us into is something you can do in this moment. Trying not to let it interrupt it too much. Okay, Kamin?
I've reconnected my... No, it's still going on, isn't it?
Oh, no. It's not because it was...
I can kind of hear it.
Is it open on your phone as well, by any chance?
My phone is...
On the computer?
My phone's connected.
Okay, there's not two... I know we swapped from... No.
No, I closed the computer down.
Oh, no. I'm personally not hearing it, but it must...
Shall I try taking off the earphones and see if that improves anything? Let's try.
Yes, let's try.
How about this?
For all stressful moments is something, you know, techniques about keeping calm in any stress. Technical difficulties on a live broadcast, but no, we won't panic.
How is this sounding to everyone? No, it's still echoing, right?
I'm maybe if someone could pop in the comments if they're still hearing it.
I can hear an echo, so maybe I reconnect again. Apologies, everyone.
No, don't worry.
It's cloudy and rainy in rural Tuscany, and that always means our connection's a bit weird.
Yeah, don't worry. There's a wind rising as well.
I'll try reconnecting again.
Okay. I can imagine that'd be a good time to get yourself very comfortable in any case, so that you are ready for the breathing exercises once we can resume. Okay, let's see this time.
And now?
Can you hear it on yourself?
I can't hear anything.
Phew! Okay, let's just go with it.
No,
Let's.
there it is.
Oh no. I'm reckoning we'll have to move forward regardless, unless it's really hindering people's ability to
I'm really
hear.
sorry, guys.
Don't worry, that's beyond your control. Something. I mean, I'm happy for you to continue if it's not really frustrating for you and other listeners.
I can deal with it, but I hope it's not annoying for everybody else.
Perhaps keep going, and we'll keep letting us know in the comments if it's becoming too distracting, and we can see what else we can do.
Okay. Okay. So
we were better postured anyway.
okay, now I've lost your audio.
Oh. And the beauty of all this is when we did a tech check, it was perfect.
I'm going to reconnect one more time. Sorry, guys. Thank
No
you
problem.
for
No problem. I'll put up a link to the rest of our TF Together lineup in the meantime if you want to check out what other sessions we'll be hosting this week. Tomorrow we have Lungarno Chats with Morgan Fumey, who'll be speaking with Rod Christie, who's the CEO of Baker Hughes. And then we've storytellers on Saturday. So hopefully we won't have as many technical difficulties on those. Okay, Kamin, how are you now?
Hiya.
Any better?
I'm still hearing it.
Okay. Try continue, and maybe it's something that'll pass. Fingers crossed.
Okay, let's hope.
Yes, that's
so maybe also we have to accept and surrender the essay.
Accept and surrender, yes, absolutely.
So accepting and surrendering.
Yes.
So lying down or sitting up comfortably, shoulders are down. Let's close the eyes. And we're going to close the mouth. And we want to breathe in and out through the nose. And just start to be conscious of the breath as you breathe in. Scan up your body as you inhale. And what I mean by scan is take your attention all the way through your body. How do my feet feel? Where am I feeling? What is feeling what? And as you exhale, scan down the body. And breathe like this. And as you're scanning, up and down, up with the inhale, down with the exhale. Be aware of the feelings that you're finding. You might feel that your shoulders are tight. You might feel that your mouth is, maybe your jaw is tight. You might feel that you have an ache or a pain somewhere. And by the same token, scan your mind. So are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling fearful? And if you are feeling fearful, see if you can locate them. Fear and anxiety often give us a sense of a racing heart, a kind of sense of panic. So here's what we can do about it. Breathing through the nose is really important because as we breathe slowly through the nose, and I propose that as you breathe in, you flare the nostrils. Sorry about that. So flare your nostrils, and it can be difficult because we're not always used to using these muscles. No. And you might find that you're doing this slightly, but flare the nostrils as you breathe in. And normal exhale. Now we're flaring the nostrils. Why? Because by flaring the nostrils, you're increasing your intake of oxygen. And as you're increasing your intake of oxygen, It's almost as if you're taking the breath straight up to sort of the brainstem. It's also doing things like tickling the cilia in your nose. These are all methods also if we want to feel armed against the virus. The nose has an awful lot of protection. And by increasing the sense of breathing up, really taking the breath up through the nostrils, we're stimulating all of those protective mechanisms in the nose. Now, if you're breathing in and out of your mouth, you haven't got that.
Right.
So that's the first tip for, I also want to say that these we're going to do an exercise as well, which is one that doctors recommend for people who are actually suffering from COVID-19.
Right.
And it's something that I know through experience with friends who have been and are going through this. If they get to, well, first of all, partly because of the fear, but also if you get to the tight-chested part of the illness, this is extremely helpful. So we'll get to that. But to get there, let's just keep doing this. I think the echo is gone. So keep the eyes closed. And we're going to breathe in through the nose for a count of 4. So if everyone would like to inhale together, let's inhale. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. And then exhale 1.
To the nose.
2, always through the nose. 3, 4. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Please carry on breathing like that, and I'll explain to you why we want to breathe through the nose and not through the mouth. One of the reasons is because you can sort of hyperventilate if you're breathing through the mouth, because you can breathe very fast. And by doing that, we're stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is what will induce fight or flight. So panic, fear, that's where they come from. So really what we want to do is calm down the sympathetic nervous system and switch on the parasympathetic nervous system, which gives you calm. It gives you a sense of peace. It brings you into the present. I hope everyone is breathing in for 4 and breathing out for 4 as we're speaking. And the next thing is, if you can put your hand on your chest and one hand onto the belly. So look, us ladies particularly are quite used to holding our stomach in all the time, right? Let's not do that. We're now going to go into deep belly breathing.
Okay.
This is absolutely invaluable for engaging the parasympathetic nervous system. And I'll explain more about that as we go along. Now, you can have a hand up here and one on your belly, or both on your belly. So as you breathe in, and it feels counterintuitive sometimes, as you breathe in, I want your belly to really flop. Let it go. Try and get a beer belly, and see, as you're breathing in, if you can inflate that belly and push your hands apart. So we're breathing in, breathing out. And as you breathe out, you're really pushing the belly in.
Okay.
Breathing in, pushing the belly out for 4. Exhaling, the belly goes in. If you want to, bring the hand up here, because what we want to check is that the chest isn't moving, because this is a panic response, and this is where a lot of us will breathe into. So right now we want to consciously keep this part still and take all of the movement possible down to the belly. So one hand on the belly, one hand on the chest to make sure the chest isn't moving, inhaling into the belly, exhaling out of the belly so that the belly pulls right in. And as you do that, you might already feel the difference.
True.
Now,
yeah.
Do you?
I definitely feel slowed down. Definitely. Yeah.
Right? It's kind of amazing because this is so powerful and it's so simple. And these are really easy ways to change the chemical composition of what is going around your body, what is being fed to your brain. So keeping that there, I propose that if you carry on, start to increase the exhale. So you're breathing in for 4, exhaling for 6 if you can. Inhaling for 4. Exhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhaling, flaring the nostrils. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhaling for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Carry on doing that to your own rhythm. Ideally, that's the ratio. But if you're breathing in for 2 and breathing out for 4, that's also okay. Work always with your own body and your own breath. You don't want to force anything. And these practices, if at the beginning you feel that you're short of breath, it will build up the more that you practice. Okay. So if everyone carries on doing that with the lovely flared nostrils.
I find difficult. It's right. If you're not used
hard,
to it,
isn't it?
It is hard, yes.
Because we don't use these muscles very much. And so initially you might find that you're kind of slightly sneering.
No, and I'm not tempted to try now on camera either. I might be something I do in my own meditative practice.
Well, I'm just going like this. Now, just to explain a little bit more, you know, our brains are still made in this. So please, everyone, keep on breathing while you listen. Our brains are still quite primitive. And so the stress response, which takes us into fight or flight, which is what releases cortisol and adrenaline through the body, which, by the way, the long term, which if that goes on long term, is what makes us pack on this kind of belly fat that people complain about that they can't get rid of. You know, the classic muffin top. There's quite a lot about that in my book, because this was something that really happened to me when I was very, very stressed out for years, you know. So long-term secretion of cortisol and adrenaline. And by long term, I mean that, you know, it goes on for a sustained period and you're not able in between those periods somehow to kind of release all of that. But, you know, this lovely breathing will help you release it. What happens is because the primitive brain is saying, you know, you have to either run away or get ready to fight. Basically, your body over time, it packs fat on in the middle, in the stomach, because it needs it to be easily accessible energy so that you can fight or flight. Yeah.
It's amazing.
And that's the classic. That's that classic. And also, you know, things like really good extra virgin olive oil really help, because studies have showed that, you know, if you switch from lesser oils, different oils, to really good, you know, and nobody in Florence or Tuscany has any excuse not to have really amazing extra virgin olive oil, you know,
the benefits of living here, absolutely.
Right, it's just brilliant. Studies have shown that actually within about a month, I think, of switching, people actually started to lose visceral belly fat.
Wow.
So olive oil, that's one of the very many magic properties of olive oil. But, you know, stay with the breathing. What happens is fight or flight goes straight up to your primitive brain. And when you're in that state and you're in a kind of gripped panic, which, you know, a lot of us are, and a lot of us can't help falling into that. And you can sometimes feel it as you're listening to the news and the figures and worrying about what's going to happen next, or all of those things. You can feel your breath getting shorter. And, you know, and actually when you start to really tune in, and that body scan is a really good way to keep tuning into your body, you start to be able to feel the cortisol pumping through your body. And the body scan is brilliant, because the more aware we can become of our own physiological responses, the more control we have over, you know, we can be in control of it rather than the other way around. So I really recommend.
There's one just interesting question. Somebody has mentioned that they don't like to focus on their breath. So what tips would you give in that case then? I suppose the practical thing about having olive oil or clover in your diet, but are there other tips or practices if you don't like concentrating on your breath?
Okay. Okay, well, I would recommend trying to concentrate on your breath, because really breath is the most important thing that you do physiologically. But if you don't like it, that's also fine. Try, if you can, to have an awareness anyway of what is going on inside you. I would say good sleep, which is something that, again, is not necessarily in our hands right now. You know, lots of people, and me too sometimes, are waking up at 4 a.m. and are sleepless, and you have the whirring brain. If you can find a method to get yourself back to sleep somehow, or to get, you know, enough sleep, even if that means you shift your sleep pattern to work with whatever is going on for you right now, you know. So if your normal bedtime isn't working, go to bed later. Or sleep in longer. Really good sleep is really, really important to being able to deal with stress and boost the immunity, fight the cortisol.
Right.
It's a key component, funnily enough, in weight loss, because so much of things like weight gain are connected with the stress response, you know. Regular meals is really helpful, because we in our bodies, we're habitual. So it's really good to try and keep the regularity. Again, it can be your timetable, you know. So if you're having to sleep until 11 because you're not sleeping until 4 a.m, then that's fine. Just, you know, make sure that your meals are regularly spaced out. You can never drink enough water.
Easier said than done, I find.
I know, right? It's hard, isn't it? It can be really hard, but keep hydrated and keep whatever reminder you need to keep yourself hydrated.
Yes.
Coffee, that we have discussed being an amazing thing, you know, limit it. So you have your coffee, and perhaps if you are having problems sleeping, try not to drink a coffee beyond 2 o'clock in the afternoon, perhaps. You know, make sure that you are regulating your caffeine intake so that it's not interfering with you when you want to go to sleep. Now, the Italian diet is a really, really brilliant way. You know, let's say the Tuscan diet, it's full of beans and pulses, lashings of olive oil, lots and lots of green vegetables, fruit. You know, we're coming into the season now where we're going to have wonderful abundance of gorgeous fruits as well. So fresh food, you know, fresh food. It's great here because food is so connected to the land here, you know, in a way that it's much harder to access, say, in London, you know. But food that is, if you can, is seasonal, comes from kind of where you're living. Honey. Honey is a brilliant, again, wonderful kind of superfood. Since we're all stuck at home, also, it can be really brilliant used as mixed with certain things, used as face masks, hair masks, all of that. Yes. And what I would say about honey, you know, there was this craze some years ago, especially in the UK, around Manuka honey, which is, you know, high potency, this and that. And that is great. But Manuka honey comes from the other side of the world.
Right.
So one of the things that people have found, especially for allergies, they say, especially if you suffer from hay fever, which again, we're coming into that period, is to have honey from where you live.
I heard that one, actually. I've never actually tried it though, but I am a hay fever sufferer and I've been advised that, so I'm interested to see when it works.
I'm really interested, Jane, if you try that, and let me know how it goes, because
I will.
My sister is a real hay fever sufferer, and she does this when it comes around to it. She kind of cleans up her diet. You know, she eliminates sugar and processed foods and, you know, all of those things that we know aren't brilliant for us.
Right.
And stays hydrated, has honey from, you know, local honey. I mean, when I was living, for example, in London, I would go to the local farmer's market and find a honey that was made, you know, some miles away.
Right.
Here in the country, there's hives right outside our door, which is amazing. In Florence, in Tuscany, in Italy, I think that stuff is quite accessible. In the rest of the world, I think farmers markets are doing a great job around that. So instead of going for the uber expensive sort of manuka honey that you find in a health food shop, go for your local honey. And again, we're really lucky here because we have loads of wonderful agricultural businesses. That and you know, right now I know that my local chapter of Slow Food, you know, is sending out, if you sign up for their newsletter, they're every week sending out lists of local agri businesses that are producing and will deliver.
Great.
So I think that can be really helpful to try as much as you can, at least for key things like olive oil and honey, to try and get it from, you know, the land that you're sort of living on.
We're entering into the last 5 minutes. So if there are any other questions, please pop them in the comments. And if not, Kamin, have you any other point you'd like to touch on before we finish up? Or is there anything else that you think is important right now?
So this idea of mindfulness, of coming into the present, it's really that thing of acceptance. Try as much as you can to accept where you are right now. You know, what can you change? Okay, try and be really straightforward. What can you change? What can you control? So often, pretty much the only thing that we can change is our own sort of body chemistry and our own sense of relaxation. And if you don't want to do, you know, some of the other practices that we've outlined, then go for anything that gives you joy. Joy and beauty, you know, those are the absolute antidotes to fear and stress. And love. Okay. Now, through this lockdown, I know that we've all felt this great sense of community and solidarity, and a kind of release of kind of love.
Yes,
you know?
It's true. The silver lining of this whole experience, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that's been wonderful. And if you can focus on that, again, from the point of view of what happens in the brain, fight or flight takes you into the primitive brain and it shuts down your prefrontal cortex. So when you're in fight or flight, you don't necessarily feel love, empathy, compassion. You know, we've all had that. We've all had that sense where we're really angry and we're really stressed and we don't care about what's happening to anybody else. If through any of these practices or just dancing in your kitchen, you know, once a day, and make it a regular habit, because again, dancing is a really good way to shake that cortisol out of your body. You know, we want to get this stuff out.
I think that's the energy that we all have. We're so used to moving, walking to work, and I think not moving has an effect as well. I personally feel I'm sick of staying still. I want to move. I bet.
You know, we're all cooped up now, right? So dancing is the antidote to that. And no one is watching. It doesn't matter. Yes. Just put on whatever, you know, just whatever gives you that, you know, you can't sit still when that song is on. Put it on and just dance. And if you're starting to feel really anxious or preoccupied with something, see if you can take a 5-minute dance break.
Great.
You know?
Absolutely.
Or take a beauty break. So if you're living in Florence and you have a window, it's going to be really hard for you to look outside and not see something beautiful. You know? So focus on the beauty, focus on the beautiful light. Spring is going on. If you have nature, if you can hear bird song, try to spend some time doing just that. Not have it as a kind of an incidental kind of background noise, but just sit down, go, you know, that's also a really good way. Just do a really big sigh and let go and just kind of stare mindlessly at the beautiful thing. If it's a patch of beautiful sunlight on the wall, you know, a wonderful piece of music that you just transports you. All the museums have wonderful sort of programs, online videos now. And I have to say, sometimes I'll put on something on the monitor, on the spare monitor while I'm working, and have just this beautiful sort of unscrolling kind of over there works of art that I can just focus into if I'm starting to feel a little kind of frazzled.
Right.
Love, beauty, joy, all stuff that is really accessible It can feel really hard when you're preoccupied to be bothered with that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if you make a small effort, you can really change your mind and therefore your emotions. Yeah. So for people who want to do that, do the breathing, what we practice, the belly breathing, and you can do that 3 times a day for a couple of minutes to 5 minutes each time, maybe before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner. Maybe do it before you go to bed.
Right.
Try and make those breaths as slow as possible, and you'll find that that will calm you down. And the last thing I want to say is the box breathing. The box breathing is really what doctors recommend, and it's what they train them in the army for stressful situations, box breathing. And that means inhale for 4, hold the breath for 4, exhale for 4, hold the breath for 4.
Okay.
Box breathing, very, very good for taking down anxiety, for taking down stress, for bringing you into the present. And doctors are recommending it for people who do get the virus and who start to experience the panic, the fear, and perhaps the shortness of breath. And it's been proven to be really effective.
That's wonderful, Alan. Honestly, you've been so helpful, and I'm definitely feeling in a different zone completely after that. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so glad to hear that.
You have a gift. You have a gift for calming and inspiring. So thank you. And
Bless you. Thank you.
And thank you also to everyone who's tuned in, and also for your patience with technical difficulties.
Yeah, sorry about all the audio stuff.
No, I soon
thing,
person. Yes.
Connections. Get on Zoom with all the people that you miss,
Mm-mm.
and have an aperitivo.
Fabulous.
A little of what you love always does you good, you know.
Wonderful.
And if you're missing your jogs and your runs, imagine it. Because lots of studies have shown that if you imagine something really vividly, your brain can't tell the difference. So whether you're actually experiencing it or whether you're just thinking about it. So use your imagination and go running in those hills, or whatever it is that you're really missing.
I found actually looking at old photographs helps me, mixed with the sadness of nostalgia, but it also helps me remember good times and remember that there's more to come too. So.
Yes, absolutely, Jane. And you know what? Sometimes it's okay to also feel our sadness. You know, it's good to integrate all of our feelings.
Yes, true.
And to not go, I shouldn't be feeling this. We need to be really kind to ourselves right now. We're in a really weird, difficult spot. And so we can't be exactly the same people that we were before. So just make space for everything.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And again, thank you to everyone who's tuned in. You'll find our other events listed here on the website below, and looking forward to seeing you at another TF Together session. So thank you again, Kamin, and hope to speak to you again soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you so much, sweetheart. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Ciao.